What's up, everybody? This is John Yelland of Judicator, and you're listening to Music Existence.
Welcome to another instance of Music Existence, where because of music, we exist. I have with me John Yelland, the vocalist, the lead vocalist of Judicator, who on March 28th are releasing their latest album, Concord. Welcome, John. Thank you so much for being here. It's amazing to finally speak to you.
Hello. Yeah, very happy to be here. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to having a good discussion.
Yeah, so take me back to the very beginning when you first started getting into music. Did you eventually get into metal through like a formative rock period, or was it metal straight up from the get-go?
I think my journey is a little bit interesting because I really got into music with the Beatles, and I became basically obsessed with the Beatles for a good long period of time. And it wasn't until a friend of mine, I think I was 16 years old, a friend of mine came over and he brought with him the Iron Maiden DVD Rock in Rio. And we started watching that, and I was so impressed by the band's epic presentation, their energy, Bruce Dickinson's showmanship. That really hooked its claws into me and made me a metalhead. And I had been learning guitar at the time and performing a little bit, but when I saw Bruce Dickinson performing, I knew that I wanted to be a metal singer.
And I love that you really not only saw a connection with the vocal kind of elasticity of Bruce Dickinson, but you channel him a lot in your own singing, I notice.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you point that out, because when I started to learn how to sing, initially it was I was sort of a Beatles copycat, and then I was a Bruce Dickinson copycat for a while, and then I was a Hansi Kursch copycat for a while, and I feel like I've really found my own unique vocal identity, and I do still carry on a lot of my influences, and sometimes I wear them on my sleeve. Um, but yeah, I think that's sort of a creative process that everybody goes through, where you emulate your idols for a while, and then when you get comfortable in your own groove, you start to branch off and really find yourself creatively.
Speaking of meeting your idols, but then eventually branching off and finding yourself creatively, as you said, you've um, you've mentioned Hansi Kursch. He is the vocalist of Blind Guardian, and that connection plays into your formative time forming Judicator because you actually attended a Blind Guardian concert where you met a founding member, Alicia Cordisco. Tell me all about that.
Yeah, in 2010, I traveled to Tempe, Arizona to see Blind Guardian, and I had nothing to do that day, so I showed up really early. And the only other person hanging around that early was Alicia Cordisco. And we both just kind of hung out and got to know each other a little bit. She was there early because she was good friends with the band Seven Kingdoms. And at a certain point, Seven Kingdoms was touring with Blind Guardian at the time. And at a certain point, Seven Kingdoms arrived and they saw Alicia and they said, "Hey, do you want to come backstage and hang out?" And so Alicia, in her good heart, said, "Hey, do you want to come with us?" And I was like, "Oh, Thanks so much. This is amazing. It's a little dream come true because to go backstage, I had never met Blind Guardian at the time, and to go backstage was an honor. We saw Blind Guardian sound check. That was cool. And we hung out in the green room. And every so often, somebody, I don't know if they were with the band or the venue, but every so often somebody would walk by and like look at us a little bit funny. And after that happened two or three times, we got approached and it was asked, "Hey, do you have a backstage pass?" "No." "I need to ask you to leave." Okay, all right, yeah, happy to leave. But even so, to be backstage and have that experience was really super cool. But anyway, Alicia and I exchanged information and we stayed in touch through Facebook. And so that was 2010. Maybe a year or so later, she approached me with a big block of music. And she said, I'm thinking about doing an album. Would you want to do this album with me? Just a little project. At the time, it was just going to be a one and done album. Heck yes, I'd love to. And so we did it. And that was King of Rome, our first album. And that got a surprisingly good amount of attention. And so we thought, hey, let's do it again. So we did it again. And with the second album, we got even more attention. Okay, all right. So we figured, let's make this an actual band. And so we really invested and put out At the Expense of Humanity. And the rest is history, as they say.
It's really cool, and we'll kind of go on an album by album basis, but friendships are not easy at all. Like connecting with someone you can call a friend, sometimes there's the initial connection, and then, when you get to influences and working together, sometimes you're like written off, like, okay, you're here and I'm there, but whatever. But it was so, like you said, serendipitous. Not only did Alicia have faith in you musically, but she approached you to sing on her project, which, like, let's be honest, took on a life of its own.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that faith is something that was mutual. We both really respect each other as creators, and you're definitely right. It began as just a project, and it really was the response from people online that elevated Judicator into something bigger.
How King of Rome came about, it's obviously having to do with like uh, historical types of things, and like in this instance, it's Napoleon Bonaparte's last campaign being defeated by the Duke of Wellington. Getting into that, you sort of learn so much more about history as you're writing, or you just sort of wing it from the get-go when it comes to lyrics?
No, that's a good question. It's mostly just following whatever I am interested in most at the time. But I've also found that this whole process, album by album, is a kind of psychotherapy for me. So there are things that I think each album is a sort of window into what I am going through or thinking or concerned with at the time. But yeah, regarding particularly the historical element, so something reached out and grabbed me about Napoleon and the Duke of Wellington and all of that. So once I've decided this is the person or event or events that I'm going to latch onto for the album, I do my very best due diligence in research, and so that has involved a lot of reading, a lot of video watching, a lot of like I said, due diligence, because I would hate it if I got something wrong in the portrayal of whatever I'm writing about, and I get called out on it later.
Oh man,
I would hate to get some historical fact wrong, you know.
that is the worst. Oh
Luckily,
man.
it hasn't really happened. The closest that has happened has been with our album "Let There Be Nothing," and that is because "Let There Be Nothing" it takes sort of the official accounts of Belisarius and Justinian, all that kind of thing. The main historian who covered those events, I believe his name was Procopius, but later on in his life, I guess, Procopius released a sort of quote unquote secret histories where he basically throws out all of the dirt that he has on Belisarius and Justinian and Antonina and all of these people that he was writing about. So, you know, being the biographer, he may have been, embellishing the official account, giving a fluffed up, flowery kind of report. So, you know, some people have said, well, this didn't really happen this way or this way with "Let There Be Nothing," and to which I say, you know, that might be true. We don't know if Procopius' secret histories or the official account is the way it happened, but with this kind of, I have to pick a side, and I found the initial official accounts much more inspiring, and that's what I wanted to lead with. So that's the only time I've been sort of fact checked about what I've written.
Well, it's cool anyway that you're able to um, portray it, express it in your very own unique, creative way, and it continues because the follow up. And what's interesting about Sleepy Plesso is you said it got even more attention, and it's interesting because I remember there were some comments like the production wasn't even quite there yet, but even then, like, it seems like people even through, because you were only 2 albums in at the time, it's not like a fully formed sort of beast yet. You still had a lot of, buttons to button up, holes to fill, so to speak. And it's just amazing that the traction continued despite that.
Yeah. So that's sort of an interesting thing is with King of Rome and Sleepy Plesso, we were really just doing this for fun.
Mm-hmm.
Alicia and I were really just throwing this together because it was fun and because we wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it got a good response and then it got a better response. And so after Sleepy Plesso, it had become well known enough and involved enough that we figured we need to get our shit together and learn really how to do this right. And we need to get the right people involved, and that involves more money.
So
and
that's like contacts, resources, everything, getting this machine rolling.
Yeah, so I think we really leveled up between Sleepy Plesso and At the Expense of Humanity, and that's why with Expense we ended up having better production value, and I think that's where people started to really take notice.
Yeah, and I think like it goes like the old saying goes, third time's the charm. Because by the third, you really, like you said, got your shit together. The songs are a lot more fully formed, and branching into that further, At the Expense of Humanity is a deeply personal album because it's about your brother passing of cancer. And I was wondering how that inspired the lyrical direction, because that was such a difficult time, and it's difficult to get inspired to write when something like that hits you.
Yeah. So where we were at after Sleepy Plesso, um, was all of the music was written. And so it was basically here, John, here is the album,
Right.
fill in all of the blanks lyrically. Um, and so I took some time to ingest it and process it. And number one, I thought, is it necessary to continue on with history? The album is so melancholy and uh, depressive, I guess. It's very moody. Nothing was really leaping out at me historical wise. So I leaned into ideas that were original. I had one idea that was kind of like a mix between Hellraiser and The Exorcist. Like it was kind of a horror original story. And I played around with some lyrics briefly, but nothing really uh, stuck with me. And it wasn't until a brainstorming session that I just started playing around with the idea of making it about my experience with losing my brother Jared to cancer. So I wrote the lyrics to God's Failures first, and I wrote those lyrics all in one sit down. And it was really just interesting how once I got started, it all just came out. It was like I lifted up a rock and all of these bugs came out, you know? Um, and so when that happened, I was like, wow, so this is one song, and I'm kind of opening up my heart here. Because my brother died in when I was 18 years old, which would have been 2008. So between then and when we started writing this album, a lot of time had passed. But I had been repressing so many of my feelings. I don't think I really processed what happened. And so that's what this album became. I was afraid after writing God's Failures because I was like, man, if I go in this direction, it can't just be one song. It needs to be what is it, like 12 songs or something? Like it's a big album. And I was like, man, I'm really gonna have to open myself up here if this is the concept for the album. So it was scary, but yeah, the whole album recounts a lot of my experiences with that. Um, and it's so it's a true story, everything that's happening in there, but there's a lot of embellishment and some I guess you could say fantasy, some escapism, some imagination, but
Well,
everything in there.
I'd imagine, like, to sort of keep your mind off the bleakness and dreariness of it, you need that sort of, not really a break, but just a little bit of fantasy, even a little bit of humor. Like, you can't help but laugh sometimes when things become so shitty.
Yeah, yeah. So the song Lucid Nightmare is the one I'm really talking about with fantasy elements.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I
And
totally see where you're
it
coming
plays
from.
on lucid dream, right? Lucid dream, lucid nightmare.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was wondering about, again, with that writing process, were you concerned as you were pouring your heart out whether or not your lyrics like made sense at the time, or did you go back and sort of rework them, or was it like, man, this is raw?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because if somebody had no idea what the album was about and they like listened to the album and read through the lyrics, they would get the general idea of what's happening for sure. I think they would understand the major plot points, so to speak. Uh, but I think was and remains kind of a personal thing, because there are characters who show up who are not like clearly, explained, and that's okay. I haven't had any complaints about that. But really, I don't know. I've considered making a video where I go through each song and explain exactly what it's about, who the characters are, what really happened, and that kind of thing, how the album maps onto my experience. Um, I've considered that. I haven't got around to doing it yet, though.
But supplementing that is a huge collaborative undertaking with all of your fans kind of like banding together. Not only that, but bonding through this experience. As you mentioned, the themes were a lot different, before this thing in your life happened. So as everyone got together, was there just a different level of understanding? Were there tears? Were there like this did you feel like this is definitely something bigger than the band?
With At the Expense of Humanity, I can say there were tears on my end because, like I said, doing the album was therapeutic.
Right.
I can't speak for the other band members, but I know that the other band members really enjoy the album and think it's great and are proud of it, and can probably relate to it to an extent. We've had a lot of fan feedback. It's funny. The general consensus is that At the Expense of Humanity is a really great album.
Mm-hmm.
But I have heard some people say basically that, yeah, it's a great album, but I don't really listen to it because it's too much,
Right.
It's too sad. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But it played that part of not only taking on something bigger than yourself with the massive production, the collaboration, but most importantly, continuing forward.
Yeah, yeah. And ultimately, that is where I think the album ends, is, for as bleak as it is, I think it ends on a little bit of a positive note, a silver lining on the black cloud. And for me personally, at least, I really do feel that At the Expense of Humanity was a great, great, great experience for me because it did help me process what happened. Because, like I said, for so many years after my brother died, I had swept it under the rug. I didn't want to explore it. I didn't want to get in there and grapple with everything that happened and the way that it affected me. So I do think that At the Expense of Humanity was a big therapy session for myself.
Mm-hmm. Then a couple years later, you have Last Emperor. Spiritual Treason is a highlight track that has your hero, Hansi Kursch. Yeah. What was it like, being able to collaborate and, work together sort of in that same space?
Well, so back in 2013, 2014, I managed to get a foot in the door with somebody on Blind Guardian's team.
Oh, yeah.
So I basically had a discussion with this person, and he told me, look, if you give me something, I can guarantee that Hansi will listen to it, but I can't guarantee that he will respond, and just don't be upset if that's the way things go. And I said, okay. I took my shot, and I got a response, and everything's gravy. But that was for my old band Dysphoria. And Dysphoria, we put out this album, and for, at the time, like a local band, the album did great. But long story short, the band broke up like 2 years after that album came out.
Whoa.
And so in my mind, I'm like, oh, my the biggest thing that's happened to me in my musical life so far is now associated with a dead band. For me, it was just like, it was so deflating. Like, I don't want that to be the way that I remember this tremendous, amazing thing. So, and the thing too is, so that album, the Dysphoria album, The Age of Ether, was being produced at the same time that At the Expense of Humanity was being produced. And when I got this foot in the door with Hansi, I had a choice. Do I
So
basically...
you're still in two different bands, right?
Yeah, so
Oh,
I had a choice.
man.
Do I give Hansi to Dysphoria or to Judicator? And I went with Dysphoria, and then Dysphoria died. And so I had all of this regret. I'm like, I should have had Hansi guest on Judicator.
Man.
Anyway, the album that came after The Last Emperor, I did end up thinking, like, I got to act on it. I mean, I have Hansi's contact now. We've talked and stuff. So there's a bit of a rapport there. The worst that can happen is he says no thanks.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and sent him some stuff and said, hey, what would you think about guesting on this? And to my surprise, he was actually like, yeah, this sounds great. Let's do it. So
man. It's
surprisingly easy.
It was, yeah, it's so, man, because worst comes to worst, it's like, no, I'm busy. And you never hear from him for like years and years after that. And you're like, hey, anything good? Everything good?
Well, and yeah, like I said, we've stayed in touch throughout the years, and because I've gone to Germany a few times, and
that's got to be huge for you, man. I'm sure.
Yeah,
you love
yeah.
it.
And whenever they tour and I go see them, I try to spend some time and hang out with them. We just performed with Blind Guardian when they came through Salt Lake City last year, and so yeah, and case in point too, we are performing our first European festival in like a month and a half.
Wow.
And that's in Denmark. And so I reached out to Hansi and I was like, what if we paid all your expenses, flew you up to Epic Fest and had you perform Spiritual Treason with us? And he liked the idea, but he was just like, I'm just way too busy right now. I can't do it. So, you win some and you lose some, and that's okay.
Oh, that's so good. And it's good that you were able to, provide that back end of, that generosity. Your generosity really shines through. And it's from like working that bond over the years that you're like, I really got to show this man my gratitude.
Yeah. Well, and for me, it really showed me the value of being the right kind of person, of being a good person who remembers your roots and where you came from. Because I've been in this game for a while now, and I've encountered people who are, yeah, I'll do it, but how much money are you going to give me? How much money are you going to give me? I have offered to pay Hansi on multiple occasions, and he says, no, I won't take any of your money. I'll do it for free because I want to do it. So
that is huge. That is huge. Like,
yeah.
No one ever, like, millions of people in the world, that is like class. That is like the sweetest thing anybody could do. Yeah,
and I am not an A-list celebrity. I'm a Z-list celebrity, or a Z-list, whatever. But there are still times where I've been put in similar situations where I could charge somebody for this, and I try to keep that in mind, not remember where you came from kind of a thing.
Yeah. So going to 2020, you mentioned "Let There Be Nothing." That was actually Alicia's last album with you guys, and she did all the music. Is that right?
Yeah, usually, not usually, always, as long as Alicia and I were the two main figures in the
Right.
band, the way things worked was she would write all of the music and I would write all of the lyrics. And so that continued through King of Rome to Let There Be Nothing.
Yeah, and how did that go down with that album? I mean, you mentioned the contention with the, you know, somewhat, historical inaccuracies, but how did that process turn out? Because she left the band in 2020, is that right?
Yeah, so that was kind of an interesting situation because, yes, we did produce the album and we felt very good about it. But then the way things went, she announced to us that she would be leaving the band. By that time, we had signed a record deal with Prosthetic Records.
Well, right around the record deal, right? Right
Yeah,
around the
and
deal.
so we got signed and we recorded um, "Let There Be Nothing," and we were getting close to getting ready to like release it and everything. And then it's, guys, I'm going to be leaving. Oh, what? So we ended up basically making an exit plan, and the album came out. And I think 3 months after the album came out, she announced to the public that she was leaving the band. So yeah, that's a whole can of worms, and there was some contention or whatever, but I'm really glad that since then, I think as of last year, it was Alicia and I are friends again, and everything's cool now. So
Oh, yeah. So it ended on kind of like a sour note between you guys, or was it like kind of like indifferent note?
no, it was not good.
Oh man,
I
I'd
mean,
imagine because it's right around your record deal, like right when this huge thing happens.
yeah, it was a sour experience, I think, for everybody involved. And
Did
on
that
my
sort
end,
of obscure the rapport that the album got? Was it kind of mired in this sort of thing?
luckily not.
Okay.
Not to my knowledge anyway. And that may be due to the fact that the album had a full album cycle before the departure was announced.
Okay.
So, and I think Alicia is very mature
Right.
and very, very professional, because it would have been easy, and she would have had every right in the world to be like,
Just
screw you
just
guys.
just say
I'm
fuck you. Just I'm
Yeah,
out.
and enjoy your album. Like it She would have been uh totally nobody could have blamed her.
I'm glad you
um
guys reconnected though. That's awesome.
yeah, it has been the best thing that I could have ever imagined. I'm very, very, very grateful to have a second shot at having rekindling that friendship, that rapport.
Especially
um
because of that history you people share, with the concert. That's magic, man. That's serendipitous, like you said. You can't
yeah,
throw that away.
yeah, and I think you were talking about like friendships, and it's hard to be friends and stuff.
It's
That
hard
was
to
one.
initiate the friendship. You know,
Yeah,
it could be easy to maintain if you're good with one another, but initiating that friendship, because if you like a certain genre and you don't look a certain way, it's like, well, normally I would be friends with you because you like this amount of bands that I like, but you don't look the part, so kind of fuck you and go to your corner, and
mm,
I'll meet someone who looks more metal or as metal as I do.
yeah. Well, luckily, like the way you look has never been much of an issue.
That's
I don't want to get in.
awesome.
I don't want to get into too many details or
Right.
whatever, but one of the core reasons that uh, she left and things didn't work out was because I was going through a phase where I was a really bad friend,
Oh, all
and
right.
I was a really bad friend, and I was being very selfish and very thoughtless. And so after she left, that was a big wake up call for me that I need to do some serious soul searching and reflecting on who I am, who I have been, and who I want to be moving forward. And so, that comes with accepting the bad karma that you need to pay off, and trying your best to be who you want to be and embodying that change on the micro level and macro level sort of interactions that you have.
And it's cool of you to take accountability for that because, any friendship, especially ones that lasted for so long, like there's no way, like I said, there's no way you guys can totally lose each other.
Yeah, well, and that's one thing too is we had let's see, 2012. Well, we'll say 2010 because that's when we like met and became friends. So 2010 to 2020, that's 10 years. 10
Yeah,
years that we runned and gunned
yeah.
and produced albums and shed blood and sweat and tears, and it went sour at the end. But yeah, if you produce X number of albums together and the band doesn't disband and it keeps moving forward, then you are going to inextricably be linked to each other. And
You
yeah, so
you remember each other's jokes and like catchphrases for like one another and nicknames.
yeah, and that's been a good thing about reconnecting is reigniting some of those stupid jokes.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man. So like bring me to your latest album, Concord, which by the way, I must say is your most seasoned, your most together I've seen you guys. Like this has been, I don't even know if it's a peak, but it's like it's the sturdiest I've heard you guys. Like everything, there's a balance of elements in what you've laid out for Concord.
I think we are the most refined and together we've been since Alicia left.
Right.
Um, I think it's like waves, like we rode that wave and it hit its peak with Let There Be Nothing. And then after that, we produced an album called The Majesty of Decay.
Right.
And I'm very, very happy with that album. I love that album, but it was for so many reasons. It was a hard left turn in terms of musical, like the instrument side, the musical
How
side.
would you, when you observe that sort of direction change, how would you describe it?
We moved from sort of a traditional US German power metal approach to like a avant-garde prog power metal approach. And so it really was a hard left turn musically, because like I said, Alicia wrote all of the music, and now our principal songwriter is not in the band anymore. So we were faced with a decision.
Was it a
Do
case
we
of stepping not and I've noticed like in mentioning that turn of genres, like it's because you're not stepping into her shoes, you're going a completely new direction. Like it's not like a sort of Back in Black thing with ACDC where, Brian Johnson had to step into Bon Scott's shoes and sort of wave that flag, pay that tribute to his fallen friend. It's like, okay, how are we gonna keep this momentum going when shit hit the fan.
Yeah. So I think I had a body of material that I had written that I was very proud of, but I never had a place to use it.
Of
So I was
course.
like, all right, we'll use that in this new Judicator. And then I had to write another like 5 songs. So the Majesty of Decay is interesting because it's all me. It's all music. It's all the music is written by me. All of the
Whoa.
all of the lyrics are written by me. And I think it was maybe cathartic, just because like I needed to burn off a lot of this energy, and get a lot out of my system. Um, so yeah, I mean the response to the album was interesting because there were a lot of fans who were very unhappy with the change in direction.
Oh.
There were a lot of fans who were very surprised, but they still got into it and liked it.
Okay.
So I think it was a mixed response from our fans, which is fine. I totally get it, and I don't begrudge the response. But
So,
what was
so
interesting,
some were like kind of what the fuck, but some welcomed the change, or some were
yeah.
more receptive to it.
Well, we didn't help the situation by making our lead single from the album a very zany, weird song. So
I imagine.
yeah, so making the High Priestess our lead single, so it's like Alicia Cordisco is out of the band now, and she's not writing. So what are they going to sound like? Is it going to be like this? Is it going to be like that? And then we come in with like a full horn section and like silly smashing a keyboard on the ground. It was very very different musically and then visually. So yeah, we definitely
I bet even like some of your longtime guys were like, all right, all right.
yeah. Well, and I wanted the lead single from that album to be a song called Ursa Major, which is still different, but it's more, at least, similar in spirit, I guess. Like it's more like fast power metal. But our drummer at the time really believed in the High Priestess. He said, this is a different song. It's a unique song. It's a weird song. And he really just sold us on it. And so we were like, all right, Jordan, like, I want to play it safe, but you want to go brave. Let's do it. Let's go out and do something different. So we did. I forget the original question. It was something about Concord, but yeah. So
Yeah,
Concord.
leading into Concord.
Yeah. So I feel like the Majesty of Decay was a hard pendulum swing out, and I feel like with Concord we've kind of come back toward the center. So I'm not going to say that Concord is The Last Emperor Part 2 or
It's
Let There Be
not like
Nothing.
a full return to form. Do you aim to sort of retain even some of those more experimental influences, or are you just going like straight on let's do what we do best? None of this like avant-garde Captain Beefheart, Frank Zappa.
Yeah, no, we what I wanted to do was sort of strike a balance because on the one hand, an artist should never compromise themselves for the audience. You should be true to yourself. But on the other hand, from my perspective, I view what we do as sort of a relationship. It's a give and take. And so for me, I'm happy to write music. I'm happy to write lyrics. And I know I'm sensitive to the fact that The Majesty of Decay was something that we needed to do. And thank you for bearing with us while we do it. If you enjoyed it, great. If not, bear with us because yeah, I want to see if we can return more toward the spirit of what we were doing before. That being said, to answer your question, yes, there are still
Remnants,
moments
residue.
there's still some lingering residue from The Majesty of Decay. So there are songs like Imperial, which is like definitely a little bit bonkers. But I feel like it's a little more restrained and a little more focused. I think Imperial is where we go the most bonkers. But by and large, I think we tried to keep things a little more restrained, a little more focused, and focus on making a handful of ideas the best they can be, rather than following like a train of thought and just letting the plant grow and grow and bloom. So yeah, it was a different approach to the songwriting philosophy.
Mm-hmm. What can you say about the team that you have now?
It's funny. We were talking about some of the team earlier, and now I get to highlight that. So Dysphoria, way back in the day, I feel like we had great chemistry. There was a lot there. But we were young and we were dumb and we were inexperienced. And so there was drama and there were attitude problems and all this kind of thing. And so Dysphoria broke up, and we stayed in touch. And those of us who drifted apart, we eventually came back and made amends and that kind of thing. And that's great. But then, so after Alicia left, some people stayed in Judicator. I don't know the motivations, and I on the one hand, it's like maybe they stayed in the band
because of money or something.
It's not for money, I can tell you that much.
Or like, when am I getting paid for my services?
No, I speculate there may have been two reasons. Number one, it might have been, man, John's really in a bind here.
Okay.
I'm going to stay in the band to help John out.
Okay. Yeah.
And then on the other hand, maybe they really did want to try to make it work. But as it turned out, after Alicia left, the band produced The Majesty of Decay. And then we started to lose some of those holdover members.
Okay.
And so I went through John Dolan, the bassist, we call him Big Boss. Big Boss and I went through a phase where it's like, okay, we need to restructure and basically rebuild the band. So on the one hand, it's like, oh no, this sucks. We are losing these band members, and this is a bad thing. Wait a minute. Maybe it's not such a bad thing, because we can rebuild the band. We have an opportunity to rebuild it from the ground up, the way that we want it, with the people that we want. So that being said, too,
and you're lucky that the people you want for this project are still on board.
Yes. So there's a couple things. Number one, Big Boss. So at the time, Big Boss and I were the only remaining members.
Right.
Big Boss lives in California. Everybody else lived in either California or Arizona. I was the only band member in Utah. Right. With Alicia gone, I was the band leader. And so I figured everybody that we bring on from now on, I want to live in Utah. And so it didn't, this wasn't the intention, but as it turned out, the people who ended up joining the band, two of them are ex-Dysphoria members. So that's fun.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like, I already know how you work. I know your strengths. I know your weaknesses. We have a good rapport. We have a lot of chemistry. We don't need to go through that awkward phase where we get to know each other for a few years. It's all there, and you just had to reignite it. And even the drummer that we are working with now, who joined the band, is somebody I've known since shortly after high school. I've known him for over 10 years. I feel very good about this lineup, and I think this lineup will take us for another 10 years, if not longer.
What can you say, too, about mixing, mastering, and the production side as far as getting the sound that you want? There's the people, and then what about the sound?
Yeah, you can be the best band in the world, but if your production sucks, then ultimately you're going to be limiting the audience that you have. Because
unless it's 1993 and you're like in the underground, and it's like, wow, this 50th generation tape rules.
Yeah, yeah. So to that end, Carlos Alvarez of Shadow Dance and Beholder, he has Dirty Viking Audio, and he has been the person we have worked with on every album except Let There Be Nothing. Um, and so we worked with him again on Concord, and he does a terrific job. And it's one of my joys to have an idea in my head, get it into a rough demo or a Guitar Pro, and then a demo, and just to see your baby go from like a rough idea and to see it get molded and shaped into this beautiful
And that's where like
thing.
the sound design aspect really comes in.
Yeah, because it's different playing it live compared to what can be done on the
Like
engineering and
utilizing
recording.
the studio, right?
Yeah, because for me that's always the goal. Is I have it in my head. How do I bring what's in my head into the real world?
And you're not
Or
just in those environments, right? You're not just, oh, I'm coincidentally live or I'm coincidentally in the studio. You use what's around you to
yeah.
like get a particular sound that you want, whether it's live
Mhm.
or in the studio.
Absolutely. And yeah, yeah.
And also I noticed that you have a son, and getting into that, being a father, do you let your son into your world of music and like starting him early on like the bands that you love and bonding in a similar way?
It's funny that you said that because he's banging on my door right now.
Oh wow.
Yeah, Harrison likes my band Judicator, and he likes metal music. He likes headbanger music, right?
Yeah.
Headbanger music. And I remember I was asking you um, your favorite band, and what did you say?
Your band.
I appreciate that, but no, you said Halloween. Remember you said that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew that it was Halloween, but Halloween is not really fun, but I like Halloween.
Halloween is not very fun, but I like Halloween.
You take what you get. And there's some
Yeah.
bands that I like certain characteristics of. Like I went to a Hot Chip concert back in I think 2010, and I only knew one song. But I proudly spent that $200, in that concert. So, it's really cool. You sort of take aspects about them that you like, and then, you know, sometimes you warm back up to them again, and you're like, wow, like they have qualities that I never considered before.
Yeah, that's an interesting phenomenon. I can't think of any that's happened with me, but yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's really cool that you have like a strong kind of work life balance, and you're not afraid to like let those walls come down. And seeing how you are with him, how you communicate with him, and how you share kind of both your established love of music and his developing love of music, it's really special, man.
Yeah, I think it's a give and take. I watch Bluey and listen to the Ghostbusters theme song 10 times in a row. And in
Bluey is
exchange,
awesome.
I actually do like Bluey.
It's really
But
smart.
yeah, so I do that, and in exchange, he lets me show him different metal bands or music videos, and some of them he likes, some of them he doesn't like. Oddly enough, he likes Nile, he likes Halloween, he likes Blind Guardian, and it was funny because when Blind Guardian came through Salt Lake and we opened for them, my wife and son joined everybody backstage, and I got some pictures with Hansi and Harrison, and because Harrison loves the Bard song. And so Hansi was like, "Are you going to help sing it with us?" And Harrison was super bashful. And yeah, it's if you love something, you want to share it with those you love. So for me, I want to share everything I can with my son.
Mm-hmm. Considering what you've been through in your musical journey thus far, with Judicator, with the other bands you mentioned, and everything in between, what have you learned about yourself, not only as a musician, but as a person?
As a musician, I think I have learned the value of creativity, both as a producer and as an audience member or a consumer. That's a way I wouldn't want to put it, but I can't think of any other way to put it. Somebody who appreciates art and somebody who creates art. I think I've really learned firsthand the value of both of those, because it's not just, I like this song. Ooh, that's pretty. It can be so much more. It can enrich your life in so many ways.
It can save your life too.
Yeah, it can really help you. And then on the personal end of things, I don't know what life lessons I would have learned had I not been in the band, path that I'm on. But I have learned a lot about myself. I think one of the things is learning firsthand the dangers of fame.
Right.
Because I have never been famous. Like I said, if I'm a celebrity, I'm a Z-list celebrity.
Right.
But there was a time where on social media, at least on the online world, it felt like everybody loved me and loved us, and everybody
like
was
you can do no wrong kind of thing.
Yeah, there were a lot of Yelland simps out there. There were a lot of people who, whatever I said and did, they would love it and
they ate it up,
praise it. Yeah, and so what that did to me, like psychologically and behaviorally,
did it consume you? Did it kind of blind you in that way?
Yeah, it did not do good things to me, and so I learned a lot from that. And so, you can be a glass half full or a glass half empty kind of person. I'm more of a glass half full kind of person. I view things in a sort of cyclical nature. I tend to be an optimist. I love this thing. I love being in a band, making music, playing shows. And so I think like, okay, we had that wave and we peaked with Let There Be Nothing. Something else is happening now. Judicator is Judicator, but it's not at the same time. It's new Decatur. And so, we may ride and have another swell and peak. And so all of that being said, if I am ever in a similar situation where people are kissing my butt or being sycophantic or something, I feel like having stumbled and fell and risen and dusted myself off, I feel like if something like that ever does happen again, I will be much more elegant and judicious about the way that I behave and interpret the signals I'm getting, so to speak.
Yeah, in other words, like, you're not going to be like, this is not going to get to your head ever again. You're not going to, bask in the adulation of, in the elation of,
Yeah, I think getting married and having kids has been big too, because I now am not living for Facebook likes or anything like that. Social media attention. What matters most to me is did I have a good day with my wife? Did I have a good day with my son? What does my wife think of me? What does my son think of me? Not strangers on the internet, you know? So yeah, I feel like I have my priorities straighter.
That's really awesome, man. Thank you so much for doing this. And lastly, anything you'd like to say to your fans?
Yeah, we have a new album coming out March 28th. It's called Concord. It's about the American West, the Wild West. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's a refreshing, fun, brisk, heavy, fast album. It has something in there for everybody, and I hope that you'll go and pre-order it today.
I know I will. And
yeah, please do.
This was a very interesting, enlightening discussion, and that's what I come for.
Yeah, I enjoyed the discussion. I think you are a good interviewer, and I appreciated that you weren't asking questions that were run of the mill. I feel like we had, I feel like you created situations for us to have discussions that were interesting beyond sort of the run of the mill interview questions that I get sometimes. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. And thank you also, John Yelland's son, for his guest appearance. Thank you.
Say bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Can you look at the camera?
Look at the camera, boy.
Can you look at the camera and say bye, stinky poo poo?
Bye, stinky poo poo.